I agreed to help a friend renovate his new place and uncovered an unspeakable horror. Well, I can't sleep, so I might as well tell you what happened in case you like hearing about F-up stuff. A few months back, a buddy of mine closed on a big house right on the outskirts of town. A multi-million-dollar affair, custom built in the 80s. We'd TP'd it for Halloween one year, back when we were both kids from broke families. Now my friend is rich and buying it as a second home. I do carpentry, so he called me up to have a look around before he pulled the trigger. I walked around inside and out and told him everything seemed to be in ship-shape condition. Not even a hint of mold or rot, and the guts were all nicely oiled. The old guy who lived and croaked there had kept up with every little detail. "What about that one room?" asked Evan. I knew what he was talking about without further elaboration. There were 4 bedrooms and 4 baths, not counting a finished basement, a kitchen, living room, study, laundry room, a bunch of closets, etc., etc. Everything you'd expect to find in a house like that, all with the highest levels of finishes. And then, there was that one weird-ass room. It was down the end of the hall on the 2nd floor. It seemed like maybe it was intended to be another bedroom, but once you went in there, you saw that it was tiled in white from floor to wall to ceiling. So then maybe you thought it was supposed to be like a spa room or something like that. But there were no fixtures or any place for fixtures. There was a single electrical outlet and a single small hole in one of the wall tiles. "Well, I don't know what the hell that's about," I admitted. "Never saw anything quite like it." "Yeah, it's bizarre. The guy's daughter said there was just like this machine in here with a tube going into the wall. They got rid of it before they listed the house. I wonder what it was all about." I shrugged. I can hardly keep up with shit these days. They've got refrigerators that you can watch TV on now. Next, they'll have robots that sit submerged in your toilet and then pop up to wipe your ass when you're done shitting. So who knows? Anyway, putting aside that crazy room, the place looks great. Literally nothing needs to be done, unless you want new paint, cabinets, so forth. But honestly, everything looks very tastefully done. It's a real turnkey house if you ask me. I agree. But that room just... I don't know. I'd want to do something with it. So put that on your radar, because I think I'm going to pull the trigger on this and start brainstorming on what we can do with it. The answer we came up with was to knock down a wall and open up one of the smaller bedrooms into a second master bedroom, adding a few windows along the way, since the room faced the south. Working alone, I figured the project would take me a couple of months, and I liked those kind of projects, where I could settle in and not have to constantly go from job to job, packing up my tools every day and getting acquainted with a whole new site with a whole new set of headaches. Still, my enthusiasm died the first day on the job. There was just something goddamn creepy about that room. With all those clean white tiles covering every square inch, it felt like something that you'd see in an insane asylum instead of a house where people lived. My first order of business was to get rid of those tiles. It took a couple days to peel them off and haul them outside. Then the room started to feel more like a construction site than an unfathomable mystery. I had something I could work with. Breaking through the wall to the adjoining bedroom would happen near the end of the project, so we could keep dust from spreading around the house as long as possible. Well, before that, I had to tear off all the old drywall, which wasn't worth salvaging after stripping the tiles, and take it down to the framing. Then cut new openings for the windows and get those installed. I'll never forget the day I started tearing off the drywall. For as long as I live, and no matter how drunk I get, I started with the exterior wall, where the windows would go. Getting started was always fun. You just take your hammer and smash it wildly into the wall, then start yanking. So that's what I did, pulling off chunks of sheetrock and tossing them onto the tarp in the middle of the room. I saw right away that the house was well insulated, spray foam. That would make it a bit of a hassle adding outlets and whatnot, but it would save my buddy a hell of a lot in heating and cooling bills. Not that he was in rough shape, financially. I guess I just got satisfaction from seeing a tight, well-built house. It was right around the middle of that exterior wall, behind the drywall, where I found the first indication of that room's previous purpose. There was a small tube there pressed against the insulation running up towards the ceiling. It was a clear tube, but staying dark inside. What the hell is that? I wondered. I'd never encountered anything quite like it. It looked like maybe somebody had been running motor oil through it or something like that. I didn't know. I figured the best way to get answers was to keep tearing the room apart. Soon I found a second tube. This one didn't have the brown coloring, but it did have a few droplets of clear liquid beaded up along its length. I knew without doubt that I was going to find something terrible. I don't know how to explain it other than pure animal instinct, but I had to know what it was. I ripped off another chunk of the wall. There, less than a foot away from my face, were 2 cells of 10 human toes, complete with long, gnarly yellow toenails. They were half buried in insulation, sort of poking out. I backed up and probably said something like, "Jesus fucking Christ. Jesus fucking Christ." Without realizing I reached for it, I had my phone in my hand. Called the police. But then I hesitated. For some unspeakably stupid reason, I hesitated. I guess it was as simple as morbid curiosity. If I didn't peel back that wall myself, then I might never know what was really back there. It was a human body, obviously. But whose? And what were those tubes? If I handed it over to the cops, I'd be shut out of there while they did their work. They would take off the rest of the wall. Maybe they wouldn't tell the public what was back there for months, or years, or ever. I had to know. For whatever goddamn reason or non-reason, I had to know. I wiggled another section of drywall loose, gently now, trying to take as big a piece as I could intact. I got about half a sheet loose, 4 feet by 4 feet. Now I knew a lot more, or maybe a lot less. I took off my respirator and puked. It was a woman. I could figure that much. She was naked. I saw now where the tubes led. The stained one into her stomach and the other one into her private area. Jesus fucking Christ. One for piss and one for shit. But what? I had my phone in my hand again. Then I dropped it because I was shaking so bad. The tubes. There were beads of water still in one of them, which means she's alive or was recently. I forgot the phone and frantically tore away the rest of the wall. It came apart in a mess of dust in small chunks because I was in a frenzy. Finally, I made it up to her head. She had another tube stuck in her mouth, leading up towards the roof. Her flesh was sagging off her face like it was sagging everywhere else, as if in a slow and desperate attempt to escape this world. Her eyes were wide open and milky white. She's dead, I thought. Then she blinked. And that, friends, is when I called the police and they took over. If you're wondering who the fuck that woman was and why she was in the wall, join the club. I'll tell you the rest of what I know, or at least what I think for whatever good that'll do. First, the nitty-gritty. I think that poor woman was kept behind that wall for a long time. The tubes to carry her waste away probably ran down and joined the main sewer line. The tube leading outside, I figured this out by having a look around the house while the police were busy inside, hooked up to the gutter system. She drank when it rained. My best guess is that she was fed through that machine that the previous owner's daughter had removed. It must have ground up food and shot it through the tube going from the room into the wall, or something like that. I haven't spoken with the daughter and don't intend to, but she almost certainly didn't know what the hell it was she'd removed from the house. And if I'm right, that means the woman in the wall hadn't had any food in months, unless by some chance an ant had crawled down her throat. As for the man who'd owned the house before my friend bought it, he was just some guy, a well-off guy, a guy who owned several businesses around town and was always a part of this and that event and the Chamber of Commerce and all that. Outwardly, a very respectable citizen, but inwardly, a fucking demon. Assuming he was the one who put the woman in the wall. I don't even know that part of it. If he did, then he would have had to hook all of that stuff up himself. He would have had to at least put the drywall up, if not the tile. Plus, the woman was half encased in spray foam insulation, which isn't usually a DIY project. But I suppose if you're going to be evil and crazy enough to do something like that in the first place, a few days' worth of manual labor is the price you pay, even if you're rich. Anyway, he had to at least know about it since, again, assuming I'm right about the machine, somebody had to keep feeding that woman, and it was his house. I don't know I've been drinking and my mind is starting to creep down all of these alleyways. Starting to? Hell, I haven't stopped. It was a week ago I found the woman, and I guess I must have slept at some point since then. I just don't remember it. And now you have it too. I guess the only thing to say at this point is, if you're able to wake up each morning and not find yourself literally trapped inside of a wall with tubes coming in and out of you, then consider yourself lucky. I don't believe in ghosts, but I do believe in the things that never stay dead. I never planned on working at a morgue. No one really does, but life has a funny way of dragging you into the places you least expect. It started after I dropped out of med school. Too many late nights, too much pressure, and a realization that I wasn't cut out for the living. I needed a job. Something quiet. Something that didn't require me to put on a fake smim. The pay wasn't great, but the solitude was. My co-workers were few, and most of them didn't last. The turnover rate was insane. People quit without notice, some after just a single night. I asked about it once. Why does everyone leave? I had asked Mark, the supervisor, a grizzled man with deep-set eyes and nicotine-stained fingers. He just shrugged. People get spooked. By what? Another shrug. You'll see. And I did. I heard stories from the few attendants who stuck around longer than a week. Stories of bodies that weren't where they were supposed to be. Lights flickering for no reason, whispers from the freezer room. A few of them swore they saw a body sit up one night, its mouth opening as if to speak before collapsing again. Most people brush it off as exhaustion. Sleep deprivation can play tricks on the mind. That's what I told myself too, until the night I met Emily Carter. Her name was Emily Carter, 29 years old, found in her bathtub, wrist sliced deep. The report called it a suicide, open and shut case. But the moment I unzipped the body bag and saw her, something felt wrong. She was fresh. Too fresh. No stiffness, no pallor, just the eerie stillness of something pretending to be dead. Her skin still had color. Her lips parted slightly as if she had just taken a breath before I arrived. I checked the paperwork again. Time of death, 9:45 a.m. It was 11:27 p.m. Impossible. I touched her wrist, still ice cold. No pulse. The cut marks were deep, clean, definitely fatal. And yet, her eyelids twitched. I staggered back, nearly knocking over a tray of instruments. My mind tried to rationalize post-mortem reflex, nerve movement, the body releases tension. I'd seen it all before. But then I saw her fingers move, not a twitch, not a reflex. They curled. My heart pounded. The body bag rustled as if something inside was shifting. I stepped back. Then I did something I never do. I zipped the bag back up. I forced myself to focus on paperwork, but my hands were shaking. Then the banging started. At first, I thought it was coming from the hallway. Maybe the vents. And then I realized it was coming from the storage unit, the one where I placed Emily's body. No. I tried to ignore it, tried to convince myself it was nothing. But then I heard a sound that I will never, ever forget. A whisper, low, raspy, a voice I shouldn't be hearing. Let me out. Her voice slithered through the metal, low and wet, like her lungs were still filling with water. I ran. I didn't walk. I didn't check. I just grabbed my keys, my coat, and bolted out the door. I told myself I was imagining things, sleep deprivation, stress, anything but what I had just heard. I spent the whole next day convincing myself I had overreacted. By the time my shift came again, I felt stupid. Bodies don't talk, they don't move, and they sure as hell don't knock from inside the freezer. When I returned the next night, I dreaded unzipping that body bag. But when I did, Emily was the same. Still, cold, lifeless, except for one difference. Her mouth was wide open like she had been screaming, and her nails were broken like she had been clawing at something. I stepped back, nausea twisting my stomach. I checked the bag for tears. There were none. I checked the storage unit. And then I made the worst mistake of my life. I looked at her fingertips. The nails were cracked, the skin raw, but underneath them, buried deep, were shreds of fabric. I turned to the body bag, looked closer, and saw the same tiny clawed tears on the inside the bag. She had been alive when they brought her in, alive when I zipped her up, and alive when I locked her in the freezer. My breath came in short gasps. My head spun. I grabbed the report, searching for any mistake, any explanation that wasn't what I already knew. Then I saw the signature at the bottom of the file. A signature I don't remember writing. My name. My hands went numb. My ears rang. I had killed her. And that's when I felt it. A whisper of cold air against my neck. A breath that wasn't my own. I turned, too slow. The lights flickered, and the last thing I saw was the body bag unzipping itself. But the story didn't end there. That was 3 nights ago. Since then, my apartment has felt wrong. Doors open on their own. The lights flicker at exactly 9:45 p.m. And when I lie in bed, I hear scratching under the floorboards. Last night, I finally built up the courage to check. I pulled up one of the old, loose panels, and I found something waiting for me. A body bag crumpled as if something had crawled out, and a single scrap of torn fabric caught on the nail, her fingernail. I haven't slept. I haven't eaten. And now as I write this, I hear my door creaking open. I don't believe in ghosts, but I do believe in the things that never stay dead, and she isn't done with me yet. This had happened to me about 6 years ago. I was doing my usual routine of walking around town for a few hours as I enjoyed walking, and I was getting my steps in for the day. I'd always start from my house, walk around town for a few hours, then turn around and head back home. I'd always go walking around noon or an hour or two later at the latest. Our walks would start at 11 a.m. at the earliest or 2 p.m. at the latest. This day in particular, I had a bunch of things to do, so I was unable to go out walking before noon. I'd eventually finish up everything that I needed to do, but it was already in the mid to late afternoon. I checked the time and it was almost 3 p.m. I debated whether or not if I should go walking or if I should go tomorrow instead since I had nothing going on the next day. I said fuck it and decided to go for my walk, but I told myself that I had to cut it short since I didn't want to be out after sunset since it would get pretty cold at night. I got dressed and headed out to get my walk in for the day. Fast forward almost 3 hours later, I looked at my phone to check the time, saw that it was almost 6 p.m. and started to make my way back home. I had a bit of a problem, which was I was about 6 miles away from my house, and it would take me about an hour and a half or more to get there. The sun had fully gone down, and there was only a faint orange glow in the sky from it. The night sky had begun to take over, and the air was turning cold. I began to make my way home and had picked up the pace as I didn't want to be outside when it was cold. I was about 2 miles away from my home and thought I was in the clear when I was wrong. I passed by a convenience store when I noticed a man sitting on the side of the building smoking a cigarette. The man looked to be in his early to mid-30s, wore a black hoodie, black pants, and black shoes. I saw him turn his head towards me and he gave me a blank stare. I thought nothing of it and just ignored it. I turned around a few moments later and saw he had gotten from his spot and began walking the same direction I was going. I kept checking behind me often to see if he would turn down another street, but he never did. After several minutes of him walking the same way as me, I hear the man start yelling, "Hey." He then started saying other stuff to try to get my attention, which I ignored. Right after that, I heard him yell, "What the fuck," at me in an angry tone. I sped up and didn't dare to look back at that point. I texted my dad and explained that there's some creepy guy following me and how he was yelling at me. My dad replies asking me how far I am, and I say about less than a mile away. He replies back that to keep walking, don't worry, and that he'll come and get me in the next few minutes. I turned behind me to see if he's still following as he stopped yelling, and he was, unfortunately. I was 3/4 of a mile away from my house, and I thought about just running there. At the same time, I didn't want this guy to follow me and find out where I lived. I was about to turn down the street I lived at when something told me not to. I texted my dad and told him I passed the street and to go the other way, which he replied with okay. I kept going forward passing the street when all of a sudden I heard some kind of frantic noise. I turned around only to see to my horror that the guy put his hood up and was sprinting straight towards me. Without hesitation, I bolted straight ahead and ran across the street. I kept running for what felt like hours until I saw a pair of headlights coming down the street. I waved my arms like a madman, hoping they would see me. Thankfully, they did, and the car stopped. I got closer and saw it was my dad. I looked behind me only to see that the man who was chasing me had somehow disappeared. I got in the car and explained everything to him. He said that he was going to drive down the street to see if he could find the man and would confront him. We drove down the street only to see nobody walking on the sidewalk or hiding behind the bushes. There was no sign of anyone being out as the streets were empty. From that day on, I never go out walking after 2 p.m., and I since then carry a pocket knife with me whenever I go out walking for my own safety and protection. I don't know what that man would have done to me had he caught me, and I don't think I ever want to know.